Hi, I'm Mandy and welcome to my channel. Today I'm back with another springtime gaming vlog. I had the best time putting together last year's video, so I thought it would be fun to come back and do another one this year. I feel like I really thrive in this bright and happy weather, so I've been feeling really good lately, and I've been playing a lot of great games that I'd love to share with you. So without further ado, let's talk about some of the RPGs I played through March to May. The first game I have to share with you was one of my most highly anticipated releases for the year, and that is Octopath Traveler 2. Now, the first Octopath was one of my favourite Switch games, and this one was just the perfect follow-up to it. Octopath is essentially a turn-based open-world RPG, which I think is a beautiful combination. From the get-go, you have access to the entire map, and you can basically play through the game however you see fit. Whether that be continuing your party leader's questline, seeking out the rest of the characters, or just doing some good old-fashioned exploring. The format of the game, as well as its artistic design, do such a good job at igniting this sense of wonder. It really is a beautiful game, and it feels so rewarding to travel to all these interesting areas and discover their secrets. Like I said, I think Octopath 2 did a fantastic job building upon the original game. They've polished up some of the mechanics and have added a lot of improvements to the battle system and gameplay in general. I also think the stories in this one are a lot more memorable. Maybe it's too soon to tell. It's been almost 5 years since I played the first game, so it's difficult to accurately compare, but I do feel like these stories have left a much bigger impression on me overall. I picked Oswald as my starting character, which ended up being a really good choice, story and gameplay wise. If you read his description, you'll learn that he's a scholar that's been framed for the murder of his wife and daughter. His story begins with him plotting an escape from prison, fueled by his thirst for revenge, very reminiscent of the Count of Monte Cristo. If you go this route, you'll be met with a really dreary, serious opening to the game. But once he makes his eventual escape, you find yourself in this huge and beautiful open world, where Oswald is free to go anywhere you want to take him. I feel like that sense of freedom and wonder you get is really heightened in his story, because there's this really dramatic payoff that isn't reflected in the others quite as much. I really love when a game's story does things that complement its gameplay like that. It felt really symbolic, and was honestly one of the coolest game openings I've played. The next game I played was Rhapsody, a musical adventure. So this here is a remaster of the original PS1 game, which they bundled with Lapis Ragnarok as part of the NIS Classic series. I'm so impressed with the way they handled this remaster. They've kept the original PS1 graphics and don't force you to use a smoother like a lot of other remasters out there. Seriously, how is this better? And how is it HD? So everything in Rhapsody looks crisp and beautiful, which is all I ever ask for from a PS1 remaster. Rhapsody is probably the shortest RPG I've ever played. It averages about 10 hours, and they are 10 hours of absolute charm. As the name implies, it is a musical adventure, and that is musical as in musical theatre. I think they did a great job with the songs. They're catchy, sweet, and cheesy all at the same time. And the soundtrack as a whole is very memorable. I've always been a bit of a musical theatre fan, so this game is very much my vibe. And the fact that the music is so 90s is just the cherry on top. The story itself is also pretty cheesy and silly, but in the best way. It's about a girl named Cornette who falls in love with a prince and sets off on a really wacky adventure to win his heart, and save him from an evil witch who also happens to be in love with him. The writing is fantastic. The dialogue is very self-aware, and there were a lot of moments that made me laugh. It really does feel like a theatrical comedy in a way. The interactions Cornette has with her puppet sidekick Karuru are always very entertaining. Honestly, playing the game feels a lot like watching a cheesy anime film from the 90s, and I can't tell you how much I love that. And as for the RPG side of things, it's pretty fun. The battle system is nothing too crazy. Cornette is a puppeteer, so she can recruit different enemies and puppets and get them to battle for her. The difficulty is pretty low, but the game has so much charm that it's still so fun to play. It is a PS1 game, complete with all the quirks that can be expected of games from that time period, but at the end of the day, Rhapsody is such a delightful and memorable game. And later this year, the sequels are finally coming out here, so I'm very much looking forward to playing those too. This next game is a very exciting one for me, and that is Trails in the Sky FC. This is a game that I've been wanting to play for something like 10 years now. I have no idea why it took me so long, but I can say that it definitely lived up to the hype. This might sound weird, and maybe it's just me projecting my desires or something, but when I started playing the game, I was very excited, because I felt like I had finally found a game that felt a little bit like Grandia 2. If you don't know, Grandia 2 is my favorite RPG of all time, and I've always been on a quest to find other games that I could feel that same level of love towards. Trails in the Sky is obviously not a one-to-one comparison, and especially after finishing it, I can say that the story direction is pretty different, but there was something about the gameplay, the presentation, and I guess just the spirit of the game that took me right back to Grandia, and I loved that. In the beginning of the game, you explore this abandoned tower, very reminiscent of Gamia Tower, and of course there's the battle system. Both games utilize this sort of dynamic turn-based style, where you can interrupt enemies and your positioning matters. This is my favourite kind of battle system, so I had a blast with it. So Trails in the Sky and I definitely started off on the right foot. I had a lot of fun throughout my playthrough, and it did a really good job at holding my attention the whole time. I really enjoyed the setup of the game. You play as Estelle and Joshua, who are teenagers undertaking training to become bracers, which are essentially mercenaries who report to the country's various bracer guilds. Throughout the game, you travel to 5 different cities and do quests on behalf of the guild. These are essentially side quests that involve things like exterminating monsters and assisting citizens. And then each city also has some sort of bigger conflict, usually a mystery of some kind that the bracer guild is tasked to solve. This is what makes up the main story of the game. And of course, I would be doing the game an injustice if I didn't mention its greater story. If you're unfamiliar with the Trails series, it's basically one massive tale that's comprised of smaller arcs, which are found in the Trails in the Sky trilogy, the Crossbell duology, and the Trails of Cold Steel games. So Trails in the Sky is really just the beginning of this whole epic. It was really interesting seeing the setup and being introduced to this world and its lore. I'm very excited to start the second game because with the way this one ended, it felt kind of like a prologue, as though the second game is where the real story begins. And I won't spoil anything, but it's pretty intense. So yeah, I definitely have a lot to look forward to with this series. So last month, my friend Jay from Cold Nights Gaming invited me on his channel to participate in a collab with our friend Brandon from Just the Gems. We were talking about our favourite PS1 games, and in preparation for that video, I decided to revisit the original Grandia. I talked quite a bit about it in Jay's video, so please check that out if you're interested. They both highlight a lot of cool games, so if you like the PS1 and JRPGs, you won't want to miss it. Like I said, Grandia 2 is my favourite game, so it makes sense that the original Grandia has a place in my heart too. The stories aren't connected at all, but naturally there are a lot of similar elements between them. There's the classic battle system, Noriyuki Iwadari's music, and the beautiful world design, to name a few things. I always say that Grandia 1 is the more lighthearted of the two. You play as a party of kids in this one, and there's this really strong theme of adventure. It's got a very fun, almost 90s anime vibe, and yeah, it was an absolute delight coming back to it. So my final game of the season, which is the one that I'm currently playing, is of course The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom. I don't really know what I can say about this game that hasn't already been said. For some context, I was a huge fan of Breath of the Wild when it came out. I wasn't used to playing big open world games like that, so it was a really magical experience for me. When I started up Tears of the Kingdom, it felt like everything Breath of the Wild was, and more. Sitting down to play this game is always so much fun because I never know what I'll get up to. I'll have a goal in mind, like head to Rito Village or something, But one thing you can always count on in these games is that you will get distracted by something along the way. Whether it be a hidden cave, a shrine you need to activate, or a dragon tier, just to name a few things. It's almost overwhelming, but at the same time, I get such a strong feeling of accomplishment every time I happen upon something new. With every shrine I complete and every secret I find, Link gets stronger and stronger, and I discover more and more about the world. I feel like I've barely scraped the surface of the story, but I'm already so enamored by the game and everything in it. I think the Zonai are really cool, and I love how technologically advanced they were. I'm very partial to cute robots, so I thought the Zonai constructs were really charming. And the Sky Islands are gorgeous. I still have so much to explore, but I'm definitely not in a rush. This is a game that I want to savor. My favourite thing about Tears of the Kingdom is how creativity is celebrated. The puzzles in this game are so rewarding because there's never one singular solution. I feel like a lot of puzzles in video games force you to think inside the box in a sense, because usually there's a right way to solve a puzzle, and you need to figure out exactly what that is. But Tears of the Kingdom is so free that you can feel free to try new things and see what works. You don't really have to worry about accidentally getting on the wrong track, because as long as you're pursuing ideas that make sense, you can probably make it happen. And that is an incredible feeling that I think few games emulate. And just to be transparent, as much as I love the game, I'm not saying that it's perfect by any means. I have minor gripes here and there. I think building is really clunky, and I don't actually enjoy doing it. Though obviously I think it's really cool that we can, and like I said, I appreciate the doors that opens up. I also miss the old towers. Fusion is a really cool ability, but weapon management can still be pretty tedious at times. But at the end of the day, Tears of the Kingdom is fun, and every time I play it, I am in awe of what they've been able to create here. You know, I really can't express how much I've enjoyed my time with each of these games over the last few months. I think a lot of people outside of the gaming community like to think that games are always about escapism, or that they're just a way to pass time. And while there definitely can be an element of that, I think that more often than not, there's a lot we can take away from them too. Honestly, the things that gaming has added to my life extend far beyond the reaches of a television screen or computer monitor. Maybe this is a weird thing to say, but video games honestly give me a lot of energy and motivation in life, and that's something that I've been feeling a lot this season in particular. It's hard to describe without sounding completely sappy, but my whole life I've used video games not as a method for escaping reality, but as a tool for guiding me through it. Whether it be working out to battle themes, getting inspired to go on an adventure, or just learning to see the world through happier eyes. It's a comfort, but one that always pushes me forward and reminds me that no matter how difficult things might be, there's always happiness to be found and things to look forward to. I think video games can definitely have a place in a happy and healthy life, and that's a sentiment I feel especially strongly during beautiful seasons like this. So that brings us to the end of this year's spring vlog. Thank you for listening to me ramble. I have a lot of plans for summer gaming, so I'll definitely be updating you on that as well, hopefully in a more timely manner this time. But yeah, as always, thank you for watching, and I hope you have a lovely day.